Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Smarter Campus podcast, where we're not just talking about education, we're changing it one conversation at a time. Today, I'm thrilled to be here with Doan Winkel, the founding director of Donley School of Leadership and Social Innovation at John Carroll University. Doan, thank you so much for being here. Just for the viewers, if you could give them a little introduction, I think that'd be great.
Absolutely. No, thanks for having me, Zach. So I lead the entrepreneurship program at John Carroll University and this School of Leadership and Social Innovation, essentially just trying to spread entrepreneurial thinking and entrepreneurial action and the mindset and all this kind of stuff across campus. At John Carroll University, it's a small private Jesuit school in Cleveland, Ohio. And my main goal in all this stuff I do for a career is to really provide much richer, more meaningful learning experiences for students. I didn't have those when I was a student. I hated my life as a student, and so I just thought I'm going to try to change that and create better for current students. I think the experience you guys have as students needs to be relevant. It needs to be something that excites you and that's meaningful and that helps prepare you for whatever you're going to step into after you leave the ivory tower. So try my best to do that and to be a voice that disrupts some things and causes a little bit of trouble along the way.
Yeah. I mean, it's great to see what you're doing on LinkedIn, and I think you inspire a lot of people. I mean, myself included. And one thing that I think really resonates with a lot of people is you talk about how you practically hated all 24 years of your experience as a student.
Yeah.
And like, how does that shape your mission to kind of improve education, I guess?
Yeah, it's funny. I tell people all the time, I'm like, yeah, I was miserable for my first 12 years of education. So then I went and got another 12. And they're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
But I knew, I don't like kids, right? So I don't like younger. So I needed to be in the college space for a variety of reasons. Plus, it's a lot. I don't want to say it's less work. It's maybe a lot less stress and anxiety than in the K through 12 space, right? So anyway, so I knew to get to that, I had to get these PhD and these degrees, but it really, I mean, on a daily basis, honestly, I just remember a lot of the experiences I had as a student. And I mean, I'm smart, right? I could do the work. I just didn't enjoy it at all, any of it, because nobody ever told me, like, why am I learning this? Why am I learning marketing? Why am I learning calculus? Why am I learning history of the French Revolution, whatever it was. I
Yeah.
like fine, I got to learn it. I get it. I'm a student, but like just tell me why. Why does this matter? And they never would do that, and they never would make that connection between here's why this might be useful for you. Here's how you might be able to apply this. And so entrepreneurship's perfect discipline for this, right? In my approach, because I think the opportunity is to teach young people problem solving skills essentially is, if we sort of pare entrepreneurship down to what I think it's all about, it's really this problem solving approach to things. And so that's useful if you want to start a business, if you're going to work for large corporation, small business, whatever you're going to do, like those are valuable skills. So it really is a daily basis. I just am consistently going like, okay, but why does this matter? Why does this assignment matter? Why does this project matter? Why does this conversation matter? Is this the right person to be teaching this stuff because they're going to be able to create that bridge between what they're doing in the class and what it means in the real world?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I think is interesting is people often think of entrepreneurship as like you learn how to start a business or you're learning how to start something from scratch. But I think your take is a little different. Like if you could explain what entrepreneurship is to you, I guess, as an education.
Yeah. It's, I think it can be a lot of different things to a lot of different people, which is
Yeah.
kind of fun and allows for a lot of play, but it can be kind of frustrating for people. So, my approach is that for the most part, generally speaking, in college, the idea of teaching entrepreneurship as startup kind of stuff, I say it's almost damaging and irresponsible because what happens a lot of time that I see is we are giving uh, we as faculty are not the best at giving constructive criticism. A because we don't know how to, like we're never trained to do that really well. B because we're disincentivized, right? Because if we give a lot of constructive criticism to students, that may reflect back on us in student evaluations, which has to do with our job, right? And
Yes.
so the system's in place where we're not really comfortable giving constructive criticism. So when we've got students working on these awesome ideas, we may know those ideas suck, but we don't say that. And even worse, we're going to set up these pitch competitions and business model competitions and actually give students money for things that we know suck or that we know they shouldn't be working on, right? And the students don't
Yeah.
know any different. Like this, you know what I mean? You're 20 years old. You're just like, no, this 50-year-old guy is telling me it's an awesome idea. Like, how do they know any different? When I, as the 50-year-old, go, that is terrible. You shouldn't do that. But I don't say that, right? So
Yeah.
this isn't everywhere, right? But I think for the
Yeah.
most part, it just is an irresponsible approach to things because it's not it's just not an authentic and it's not a realistic experience for students. So the way I look at it is to say, look, there are certain skills and certain ways of thinking that people need to use to launch and grow successful businesses. Those are the same skills and ways of thinking that people need to have to be valuable employees. It's about creating and capturing value, right? And
Yeah.
so my approach is to say, let's get these students mastering these kind of skills because then whatever path they go down, they're going to be valuable. They're going to be able to create value for an employer, which helps them in their career. They're going to be
Yeah.
able to, have a side hustle that they can scale up. They're, whatever it might be, right? It's the same basic stuff. So it's just a little bit of a different approach. And I think it's more of that like mastery approach, right? Where
Yeah.
it's not just you're going to learn these things during weeks 2, 3, and 4 of this class, and then you're good. And
Yeah.
then we'll move on, right? But it's let's make sure that you actually practice these things and you actually get real practice with real situations and scenarios where you can develop these skills.
Yeah. I mean, mastery-based learning thing is I think, a really important thing to touch on, and it's something you focus on a lot of the time. So the next question is, I guess, based off that mastery-based learning, if you could kind of snap your fingers and change one thing about the overall education system, what would that be? I know it's a huge, huge question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, wow, that's where do I start? So, no, I think it is, one of the things that I found to be kind of interesting and I think exciting and helpful to students and to faculty and all these kind of things is if there's a way to separate the the teacher role from the assessor grader role, right? So if those two people are different people, it really just completely changes the dynamic of everything, right? So the
Yeah.
teacher and as far as I can say students are honest with me, which I think they tend to be, the ones where we've tried this, they really enjoy it because they see this teacher as like a mentor or a coach, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the role that they should be, in my opinion. And then when it comes to giving them feedback and assessing their work, there are these subject matter experts who are doing that. And the teacher may be a subject matter expert, but in my experience, they're never going to be seen that way. They're going to be seen as a teacher, right? And so
Yeah.
separating those two things allows the teacher to be much more of a kind of pure mentor coach role. And then it allows somebody who really has deep subject matter expertise and particular skills to provide really meaningful feedback, right?
Yeah.
And that person providing the feedback, it's all blind. So there's no bias that comes in about like, this kid's a screw up, never showed up to class, so I'm just going to hammer him because I don't like him, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, regardless of what we want to say, like we as teachers have tremendous bias that we bring into this grading scheme. And so
Yeah.
again, if we take that out of it, it's just a more, I think, more productive and more meaningful experience for the students that way.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's great. I haven't even really heard people talk about that too often, which
No,
is,
it's
yeah.
there's a big movement of it in the high school space,
Okay.
but there really has not been in the college space. There's been people who've tried various iterations of this kind of thing, but nobody that's really gone deep and said, I'm just going to do this thing full blown. And there's
Why
reasons
do
why. Like there's a lot of structure in higher ed that really fights against that kind of a system. But I like a good challenge.
why do you think it is so hard to change things in education?
Well, I think, I think teachers, for the most part, are really, really overworked and undervalued.
Yeah.
More so in the K through 12 space. I think
Yeah.
higher ed's a little different, but I think there's that dynamic at play, right? And so changing things like, okay, now you have to change how you do things, and you have to change all your material, and you have to redesign all these courses. Like, that's a lot of work. And
Yeah.
so put that work onto somebody who's already overworked and undervalued, or at least they perceive they're undervalued, right? That's a tough thing to do, and to have them be excited about it, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's just a really, really tough thing to do. In the higher ed space, I'm not as familiar as high school, but in the higher ed space, if I want to make like drastic changes to things, it's got to go through this committee, that committee, this committee, that committee, and so it takes like 2 years. And then by the time that all happens, it's all out of date anyway, right? So then part of it is like, well, why would I do that when
Yeah.
it's going to be out
Yeah.
of date anyway? So
Yeah.
there's just all this like inertia, tremendous amount of inertia baked into the structure of the industry, essentially.
Yeah. And I feel like the time we're in right now is one of the first times in a long time where it's been like drastic change needs to be made right now. And that's one thing you've been really leading the charge on. And like,
Yeah.
how would you say your job's changed in the last 3 years because of AI?
So a lot, but sometimes also a little, right? And this, to me, this is kind of what's interesting about it all is everybody's playing around with this, and everybody's trying to figure it out. I think more than I've seen, there's so much sharing and collaboration around what do we do with this thing?
Yeah.
What should we do? What shouldn't we do? And I think that's wonderful. There's a huge community I found on LinkedIn, for the most part, of people just really being very vulnerable and sharing what they're trying and experiencing and what works and what doesn't. And nothing's, there's not a right fit for anybody, but ultimately, to me, it's been about, let me take a step back and let me think about, why am I doing this? How am I doing this? And then what exactly do I need to do based on, because it's a brand new world, right? Regardless of what anybody says, like, there's never been anything like this. It's been, I think, more disruptive than anything I've ever seen in my time as a student or a teacher. And so we're just trying to figure it out, and so it's really been quite different, because it's allowed me, or forced me, to step back and really go, okay, how do I do this different? And I may or may not decide to change things based on that, but I at least have to rethink that. And I think that's the most important part, is it's forcing teachers to rethink, how am I doing what I do?
Yeah. And I think one worry is that it's going to make students, less creative and lazy, right? I mean, that's what a
Mhm.
lot of people say. Like, what's one strategy that you've had to kind of like combat that?
Yeah, it definitely is a problem that's very relevant. And again, back to the point of these overworked teachers, right? I mean, a lot of the
Yep.
work falls on the teacher's shoulders of, okay, we're going to use this AI stuff in the class, we're going to bring it in, but if we don't do it in a sort of pedagogically sound way, then it will just create some laziness, right? And it defeats
Yeah.
the whole purpose of this, of learning and growth and all this kind of thing. Um, so two things. One is, I talk a lot to a lot of people, and a lot of people outside my discipline, about what are you doing and what are you learning. So I think that sharing and that collaborating is critical. And then two, it's co-creating things with students. So it's being very transparent, having transparent conversations with students to say, where are you with this, right? And being able
Yep.
to kind of meet them where they are, and then help them understand the value of this technology and these tools, but also the responsible usage of it, right? So the human has
Yep.
to be a part of the process, and where does that go? And I don't know the answers to that. The students don't know. Nobody knows the answers to that, right? But my approach is like, well, I don't know. Let's figure it out together. Let's try some things. This worked. This didn't work. Why did this not work? Teach me, right? Like, I learn a ton
Yeah.
from my students. So I think it's just that, it's that like willingness to experiment, and not to say like, I'm the expert, I have to be the expert, I have to do everything, and it has to be set in stone, and there's no flexibility or adaptability. It's just like, let's try some things out, let's experiment, let's share what we learn, and let's talk to other people about what they learned. And if I want to include like writing assignments in my entrepreneurship course, I'm gonna go talk to like English people who
Yeah.
are really good with writing, right? Or if I'm trying to incorporate like data stuff, I'm going to go talk to the data analysts and the data people who are really good with that, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
not the expert.
Yeah. I mean, it all starts with collaboration. It's kind
Yeah.
of, I've been on LinkedIn following you for about probably 2 years now, which is kind of crazy. And it just seems that everyone, if you just listen to others and kind of ask questions, that's really what is helpful. And I mean, you've done lots of cool stuff with AI and education. I know you're I know an influencer is an interesting word, but I would say you're an influencer for me in that space. What would you say one of the, like, any great success stories to share from your AI like experience in the last year?
Um, I don't know if I would say success stories. I think the thing I've seen
Yeah.
is I've seen a lot more spark in a lot of students. I've
Okay.
seen a lot more curiosity in a lot of students. I've seen a lot more engagement in a lot of students. The way that I've been able to do that is to be transparent and to be authentic, right? And so it's just
Sure.
coming into these classroom experiences and environments and saying, we're going to try to figure this thing out. Let's play around with this thing. Let's have some fun. It's going to
Yeah.
be messy, right? But let's go. And with that general kind of approach, I've just seen like the students open up, right? Because what I find is students are using this stuff, right? But there's this tremendous anxiety around, can I use it? How can I use it? How can I not use it? This class says this class says this class says this, right? And so there's huge anxiety around, what do I do with this stuff? And so in my courses, I just kind of go like, yeah, we're using it. We're using it as much and as often as possible. We're going to figure this stuff out. Let's have some fun with it. And it just creates this like really wonderful um, sort of experimentation, curiosity kind of environment that I love going into. I mean, I love it, right? And the
Yeah.
students keep showing up and keep engaging, and I go, well, that's what this should all be about.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I think one thing that's really cool that I've found through AI, through like entrepreneurship and stuff, is the skilling, right? You can do a lot of things that you couldn't do before. Is that something you talk about with your students in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, 100%. It's okay. So not everybody's good at everything. Some people are
Yep.
really good at, coming up with ideas. Some people are really good at evaluating ideas. Some people are really good at you know creating visual graphics around whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has their skills. And so this is a really cool opportunity to go, well, I suck at that thing, but now I have some help that can really help me work through that part that I used to get stuck on and that used to be really frustrating. The trick is, let's not have this thing replace that part of you. Let's have you figure out, how do I leverage these things to learn about that, but to get through it to the next thing a little more efficiently, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I think it's a more positive, meaningful experience for students, because it's like, we don't have to struggle as much with the things we used to struggle with. We shouldn't ignore those things or like jump past those things, but we can work through those sort of bottlenecks a little quicker, which I think gets students to the things that they really enjoy and are good at a little quicker, right? And so it's a
Yeah.
better experience for them, it's a better experience for me, better environment, and I just feel like everybody win, right? And I shouldn't, well, there's definitely some losses and
Yeah.
some messiness to it, right? But it's a win-win in the sense of like, we're just trying to figure this out and we're going to do it together.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. And the other question I have is, educating your students on how artificial intelligence works and how they can use it in their day-to-day life is important, I would say. What have you done to kind of educate students on what this technology is, impacts societally, environmentally, all those things that could happen from the stuff going on behind the scenes?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I struggle with that one. I tend to be much more of a practical, like,
Yeah.
what do we do? Step one,
Yeah.
step two, that's just how I work. And so I'm really comfortable in that zone. I get much more uncomfortable with some of these more, the environmental and some of these more philosophical conversations and all that. So that's been a big challenge of mine is to learn about that and incorporate that kind of stuff into courses. But what I try to do is have, it's almost like the Socratic dialogue around this, right? Like, let's just talk about it. I don't know. I don't know. It's not something I enjoy
Yeah.
looking into or I'm really great at. So let's just talk about it, right? And I get some of these students who are just like, this is going to ruin the environment. And I go, I don't know about that, but it's definitely an issue we should talk about. So what do we know, right?
Yeah.
What is reasonable? And somebody says, I heard this the other day, and I go, okay, cool. Is that really true? I don't know. Let's figure it
Yeah.
out. Right? So, um, and that's kind of how I learn, right? Again, to me, it's like, let's meet the student. I'm going to try and meet the students where they are. And sometimes there's more of a environmental concern. Sometimes there's more of a concern about the dumbing down of learning, whatever it might be for a particular class. And I go, okay, cool. Let's meet there and let's talk through whatever might be top of mind or most concerning for that particular group of kids in that particular semester.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's great. It's just such a hard concept. I guess, it's like this new
Yeah.
technology comes in, you have to teach them how to use it, but then also there's stuff that you have to learn and teach of what it, impacts and stuff like that. And it's just been an interesting thing to kind of talk to people about, just wide variety of answers.
Yeah.
But, kind of getting to the end of time here, one thing I usually ask is like, say an educator listens to this and they just want to start somewhere. They're like, I don't know what to do with AI. What's some advice you have for them to just get going?
Yeah, I always tell people find like the one lesson or the one day of your class that students are most disengaged, right? So,
Okay.
like for
Yeah.
me, a lot of times it comes down to some sort of financial stuff, right? Like it's just painful for me,
Yeah.
painful, So I'm like, find the thing that you struggle the most with, getting students engaged with, and take just that one specific thing and go to whatever chatbot you like, right? Go in there and just go, here's what I do. I got this 50-minute lesson or whatever it is where I got to teach, we got to learn about like financial projections or, whatever that thing is,
Yeah.
and just have a conversation and be like, okay, what's a better way to keep students engaged for this? And just have the conversation and talk to the thing like you're talking to a person. And maybe it comes up with garbage that you don't want to do. Okay, you're learning about its capability and about how to engage with these things. But it's going to have some kind of a nugget, and it's like, just try that. Just take it into class, try it, and be totally transparent with your students, right? Go in and go like, look, I usually suck at this. This is usually a terrible class. Nobody likes it. People are totally disengaged. So we're going to try this little different thing. And here's what I did. I did this, and it's telling me I should try this. So let's just try it and see how it goes. And then after the class, you have a conversation of like, what do we think? How'd that work? Right? Again, maybe it falls flat and maybe it blows up in your face. Well, if it really is a time where previously students didn't like it and they were totally disengaged, like it was already bad. So it's not like it's gonna get
Yeah.
worse. You know what I mean? But at least your students, I think, for the most part, are going to appreciate the honesty and the authenticity of like, this is terrible. So I'm trying to do better for you. And here's what I did. And here's how I'm going to try this. So let's see what happens. Right. And being vulnerable enough to show students like I struggle with some things. Like I'm not the be all end all for all things, So that's what I say. Just very one little small thing. Don't go like I got to redo my whole curriculum. I got to just like
Yeah.
one little thing that you struggle with the most. Play around with it. Have a conversation. See what it comes up with. Try something. Be very transparent with students about what you're doing, and it sort of starts the ball rolling.
Yeah, I mean that's great. I think that's a lot of people I've talked to have kind of mentioned just start with one thing, but I think the point of using something that wasn't working already is awesome. And I don't know, I just haven't heard that. Yeah, it's great. I mean, why wouldn't you
Yeah,
do
right.
that?
I mean, that's what, like, if
I-
you get a new tool, I don't care what the tool is. If you get a new tool, you're just like, how do I use this to make something that didn't work better? Like, that's just how you use tools, right? And this is what,
Yeah.
like, you don't get a hammer and you'd be like, how could I hammer nails that already work better. Like that's not what you do, right? So that's the way to look at it. You're like, how does this thing going to help me with something I already struggle with?
Yeah, that's so funny. Because people forget, it's not this thing that just end all be all does all of your things in one click of a button. It's
Yeah.
supposed to make life harder, easier, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it to me, like from a student learning experience, it's like let's get past some of this sort of like surface level nonsense and be able to dive deeper into some of the really meaningful skills that we really want students to be developing. And if like, how do I use this to help me do that? And it's different. It's different in entrepreneurship versus history versus chemistry. Everybody's different, but it can
Yeah.
help somehow if you just play around and experiment with it.
Okay. So, off that question,
Yeah.
do you think as AI kind of comes more to the forefront of education and all of that kind of stuff, do you think like history degrees, entrepreneurship degrees, engineering degrees, do you think they'll slowly start to have more similarities than differences in learning? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't think so. Because all these disciplines, there are some similar skills and similar foundational kind of things, but they're just so different, and there's such a different like path of learning and a different set of objectives and skills you're learning. So I don't think that'll happen. I think what hopefully it does is get students learning much quicker, much deeper. That's what I hope
Okay.
anyway, right? I hope if we
Yeah.
can play around with it, like it gets to that point so that the experience you all are paying a lot of money for becomes a lot more valuable.
Yeah.
Would be part of what I see as the potential of this.
Okay. I mean, yeah, that's great. And yeah, great answer. Last question I ask just everybody. What's the number one use case that you use AI for outside of education? Like I use it for cooking all the time. Just something fun. Yeah, I'm curious.
Um, yeah, I think I kind of use it to have fun, right? Like come up with really bad dad jokes that I'll like text my wife. So it does actually a pretty good job of really awful dad jokes.
That's good. Well, that's super funny. You get some good responses on that. Like, but
I'm sure.
my favorite thing to do is take a picture of the fridge. Be like, what do I whip together with all this?
Yeah,
The chat GPT is pretty, and that's one thing I feel like people don't do enough. It's like it's also here for fun stuff. Like you can use it for dad
right.
jokes or
Yeah,
planning vacation or stuff like
yeah,
that.
yeah. I hear from a lot of people that are using, like you said, right? Here's a picture of, I don't know, whatever it is, help me fix this thing, or screenshot of a computer, like it's give me this message. What does that mean? Or, so I mean, it's still like super useful, but it's like in daily life kind of
Yeah,
a
it's just
thing.
something completely
Yeah.
else. Well, Doan, thank you so much. This is such a wonderful
Absolutely.
conversation. I think a lot of people see you as a leader in this space, and I'm really lucky that you were able to come on this podcast. So, everyone listening, I'll probably catch you again next week, and thank you guys so much for being here.